Dragon Ball, horror, kaiju, and more. Steven's Toy Reviews.
Hello collectors, it's going to be Steven here, and it's time for another
Figure Fight.
In tonight's fight, we have a classic lineup here of old meets new, Kyoto versus Tamashii Nations. In this corner, we have a 2011 release, at least from what I'm able to see documented, of the Revoltech Gigan. And in the other corner, we have the newly released in July of this year, MonsterArts Gigan 1972. While we have an older figure against a new one, this will be helpful for those looking to upgrade, maybe not, or making the choice, maybe picking up both. Remember, this is a Tale of the Tape series, point by point, and the one that comes out on top with the most rounds won is going to be the victor. Get a snack, take a last bathroom break, and be sure to vote in the community poll in the description. We're also going to do things a little bit different in this one. It's not going to be your typical figure fight. Alright, last chance, get ready, ring that bell, and let's start the
Figure Fight. Round 1.
Sculpt and Paint. 2011 was a different times in the standards with paint and details, sculpting techniques, and so forth, and talent acquisitions, which we'll get into a little bit later, was different than in the realm of kaiju. Basically, Kyoto didn't have a shot at getting Yuji Sakai on board for their efforts. Admittedly, they weren't really utilizing him for Revoltech stuff, though they have used his sculpts for their model kits in the past. Admittedly, their sculptors have been amazingly talented, but for here, he was working with the MonsterArts line. Though the sculpt that they have here is rather nice, it's not as detailed or has the same level of paint applications as the modern-day MonsterArts on the screen as well. Though time should be taken into subjective consideration for the details found in the sculpt, if we're looking at them side by side as to which one achieves the better outcome, it's easy to say it's the MonsterArts. Tamashii's kaiju throws a giant right hook, quite literally speaking, to get the point, but here's where we begin to change the tide of the fight.
Round 2.
Accessories. Despite having a gimmick with the MonsterArts to achieve a flying pose, which will be the figure's downfall at a point later, and even now, and having a promo picture of it flying, Tamashii Nations included no accessories with their figure. The significantly cheaper, which we're going to talk about next, Revoltech included a set of buildings. Disgraceful. The Revoltech begins a beatdown with a slug to the gut for a point.
Round 3.
All right, here's where we kind of do something a bit different for the figure fight. We're going to talk about price like this. TLDR, the Revoltech is cheaper across the board, no matter how you splice it, even in the aftermarket today, so it's going to get the point. But here's where I wanted to sort of bring it back and talk about things a bit differently. So if we go with the MonsterArts, we're going to round and say it's going to be 12,000 yen. It's going to be at US distribution, between like $120 and $130 depending on retailer, which, by the way, that is not going to be the same amount in USD as it is at the exchange rate either when it was announced for release or at the time it was released. Go ahead and do the math yourself, so I'll let you figure that out. But anyway, for the Revoltech, if we go by the standard figure fight rules for something that was released, again, in 2011, from the information that I was able to see, it was 2,500 yen or so, according to what I was able to find, particularly at HLJ. We're just going to go ahead and round between that and Hobby Search as well. So with that in mind, clearly the Revoltech wins. However, it is 2023. That is a huge difference, and there's no way that this would be able to be made today with the price in mind at retail of about 2,500 yen. Okay, so do we continue with figures this old or more at the standard retail price, the manufacturer suggested retail price? I have a whole video talking about what MSRP is. Do we stay that way, or do we factor in inflation and we just go that route, which, based on Japanese inflation rate, don't Google that, it is actually going to be around 2750 yen, from what I was able to see according to something I will cite in the description of the video. So then if we go that route, Gigan still wins. Now, we can go something equivalent like the sci-fi Revoltech Jack Sparrow, which was released around the same time. He was about rounding like 3,500 yen and just recently released for about 10,000 yen. So again, rounding, we're talking about 3 times the price, which 25, 50, 7,500. So if we 3 times the price, well, then Gigan still wins. The Revoltech. If we go by eBay and MonsterArts and so forth, aftermarket sales, he's going to equal out to be between $80 and $100. So it's still going to be cheaper than him. So the Revoltech still wins. So here's what I would like to know your thoughts in the comments down below, because it's going to be different. Do we still, for older figures, keep original MSRP because that is what the company intended to put into the figure in terms of price and cost? Current day inflation rate. Do we go with something that is equal to-ish and go by maybe a reissue that recently came out and see price adjustment accordingly? Or do we go by current aftermarket sales with the most reasonably priced one? Let me know in the comments down below.
Round 4.
Scale, and once again, hey, we're back here. So this is again interesting because we come to a crossroads here, because unfortunately these figures were made with different scales in mind. So technically they're doing something different, but realistically speaking, they're Gigan action figures, and folks want to know which one they should get, especially with the Revoltech stuff being a staple in the kaiju community for action figures of their favorite monster characters. So here's where we stand. When Kyoto was making the sci-fi Revoltech kaiju figures, they had a whole host of them in mind, and they actually made them all in scale. And according to an interview that was published by It's All True, link will be in the description, apparently the Big B, I wonder who that might be, had a lockdown on Godzilla, Mechagodzilla, and King Ghidorah. And with that being the case, they basically abandoned the line because they couldn't make the big monster of Japan. So they had a nice cast of characters. They had Anguirus, Baragon, Gigan, they did Mogera, they did Rodan, but they couldn't focus and get Godzilla, Mechagodzilla, or King Ghidorah out the door. They actually had Mothra Larva and Jet Jaguar all ready to go pretty much on the table and then canceled. So this never happened, but they had their own scale, and pretty much everything there is in scale. So they all work. The MonsterArts Gigan, however, is intended to be in scale with some of the other figures that have been released, and generally speaking, you know, he's going to be in the 6-inch scale. I'm hinting at something else that's coming up. So he's going to be good for folks who want a 6-inch scale Gigan, though the only critique there that's going to be is with the Showa era monsters that Tamashii Nations is putting out, we have some that are really small that actually do scale well with the Showa era Revoltechs that Kyoto have made. But then other times the Showa era figures are really tall, Gigan being one of the taller ones. So for a 6-inch scale, if that's what you're looking for, Gigan is good. He blends in well with even some of the Heisei and Millennium era stuff, and they're even doing a Godzilla 1972. However, we don't know how big that's going to be in comparison because it's not out yet. So he could be maybe even as tall as this one. We don't know. So the moral of the story is they're different scales, and basically you can't say that the MonsterArts is better for all collectors and it does the sizing and scale better than the Revoltech because it's bigger when the Revoltech is meant to do something specific at that time back in 2011 and other kaiju action figures didn't exist. And you can't say that the Revoltech is better than any of the other kaiju action figures that are on the market because they didn't exist and they were looking to fit within their own line. So realistically speaking, the only argument that you can make is it's going to have to be a tie and both combatants are still in the ring.
Round 5.
And this will be the final round articulation. We're saving the best for last because, well, if you have an eagle eye throughout the video so far, you may have noticed something. I actually used some B-roll stock footage so far. Let's talk. So for the Revoltech Gigan, I mean, pretty much we have actually a lot of the same beats of the articulation scheme that the MonsterArts has. We actually do have a mouth that opens and closes all the way. What's interesting is he even has that little tooth that's in there, which is cool. The mandibles, whatever you want to call it, they go all the way in and out, which is nice. And I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is just kind of give you the overall beats for the articulation. Yes, some cite them as unsightly, but we don't have the perfect sculpt that covers the joints. But back then, what Kyoto was doing for the articulation scheme for the Revoltech is basically they were using all revolver joints, as they called them, that click for all of the joints. So basically, all of the points of articulation on Gigan here will have a swivel and a hinge combo that click. So while you don't have true fluid range of movement across the board, you get the same type of movement for all of the joints. So this Gigan can clearly T-pose. He has swivels everywhere. So even here, you can get a swivel, which is great. So you can get Gigan to sort of do that if you want. We have no torso articulation really. Gigan, of course, can look up. The hips are plugged in a little weird. They're plugged up, but nevertheless, he can kick forward. He can kick back. You can actually, this is a trick that they use in the community, actually pop a part off and then move it. And then you can pop the part back on to change the range of movement pretty much entirely. So you can get Gigan to kick out to the side just a bit, but then you have to readjust the joint to kick forward and back. Of course, he has the knee and ankle rocker with a hinge. So that's pretty much the general articulation scheme for him. I'll talk about the tail in a second. For the MonsterArts Gigan, I mean, once again, we do have the ball joints and so forth that allow you to raise and lower the arms. He can move his arms around. He can get that movement as well, just like I showed on the Revoltech, which is cool. He can kick out to the side, kick forward, and kick back. He does have the double hinge knees. He has the ankle rockers and so forth, right? The tail is really, really good, right? And he has the movable sails. So yeah, the tip of the tail on mine likes to come off, but we can leave that off for right now. That's fine. So let's go ahead and, well, one more thing. The mouth actually doesn't close all the way, unlike the Revoltech. And of course, Gigan can look up and down for the MonsterArts and look left and right. But realistically speaking, like the Revoltech, he can do that. All right, so for the tail on the Revoltech, this is sort of a point of contention for some because most of the Revoltech kaiju, they use bendy wire in the tail, right? Okay, so with that bendy wire, unfortunately, it is known to snap, crackle, and pop. In some instances, you may have cases where it may puncture through, right? It unfortunately can lead to issues, just like you get a little hole in the casing for it, right? Or another issue that comes up is just that you lose the range of articulation. So like for mine, for an example, I'm like positive across all dimensions that the bending wire in the tail snapped. But you still have the Revoltech joint where it plugs in, no issue. So it will click up and down, and you can actually tilt it just a little bit where it plugs into the body, and you can plug the tail back in, and you can get a little bit of movement like so. Gigan here can still get into a flight pose, no problem. All is good. So the tail is not favorable. There is, of course, the risk of breaking the wire. There is a chance of it popping through. And if it does, well, it pops through, and that's not very good. So that is a flaw of the Revoltech, right? Okay. Now, for the MonsterArts Gigan, there have been some reports for the sails, because I didn't talk about the sails yet because it has a push-pull mechanic, right? And one of the things about the push-pull mechanic is that with it, it has translucent ball joints where it plugs into that socket where you can push and pull it. And that's so this way you can move the sails around, and that helps with Gigan going in and out of like a flight mode, which again, they didn't include a stand for. So, as I made mention in my review for the MonsterArts, he did fall over, right? So my MonsterArts Gigan did fall, and he fell on this side because I accidentally knocked him over, but that was with the sail popped out. Unfortunately, I did knock him over again, but with the sail popped in, and it broke. I know what you're saying. Steven absolutely ham-handed this. You know, Steven really doesn't know what he's doing. And I am very inclined to believe you. Right? Yeah. So, needless to say, it is very much so an issue that can happen with just the smallest accident. And this Gigan basically will not survive any sort of shelf dive in the worst of circumstances. So, with that being said, I am salty about that, obviously, but I don't want to introduce any sort of bias because of that in particular. So what I am going to have to say is broken bendy wire tail, broken sail. I'm going to have to say that this is a tie and leave my feelings out of it. The MonsterArts, that's kind of BS.
Final bell.
And with that, the SH MonsterArts Gigan looks better and may tickle some fancy for some in some areas, but when it comes to point by point, somehow the Big B did not manage to upset one of the original Kaiju action figures on the market. Tamashii Nations, this is the first sign you need to do better. Of course, everyone will have their own preference, and as a matter of fact, in nearly all areas, I would prefer getting the SH MonsterArts. I would like to say this is the better figure, however, when putting these two together, it's hard to say that the Revoltech doesn't hold its own really well. The moral of the story is, I really do like both of these figures, and as much as I would like the SH MonsterArts to really come on top because I want to really like it, it's just what I'm looking for in a Gigan. It just can't do it. As a farewell, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and be sure to vote in the community poll. Did the ref make any bad calls, miss some pocket sand, or count wrong? Let us know and ask about other figure fights. And now, we end the video today, and I hope you can come back for more. The end card should be popping up so you can check out other videos, including reviews of these two Robo Space Chickens. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch ya in the next video.